Okay, here's our second example. This is part 2 of t-testing. It says a researcher believes that in recent years, women have been getting taller. She knows that 10 years ago, the average height of young adult women living in her city was 63 inches. The standard deviation is unknown. She randomly samples 8 young adult women currently residing in her city and measures their heights. The following data are obtained, and then it lists the 8 numbers from her sample, and those represent heights. Okay, going through the 6-step process for this. For step number 1, writing the null and alternative, mu equals 63 is the height from 10 years ago. And she thinks that women are getting taller. So we're going to do a greater than 63 alternative. Step number 2, finding the critical value. We're going to shade the right tail since it's a greater than scenario. N, our sample size, it said in the prompt, she sampled 8 people. So our degree of freedom would be 7. Again, N minus 1. And then notice, guys, that it didn't give us an alpha value in the prompt. So when this happens, we're just going to use an alpha value of 0.05. That is the most commonly used alpha value. So when one's not given, that's kind of what we're going to use as the default, 0.05. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at our t-chart. We're going to look up 7 degrees of freedom at an alpha of 0.05. So 7 degrees of freedom and an alpha value of 0.05. It looks like it says 1.895. Okay, 1.895. 1.895. So that's our critical value. Step number 3, we're going to find the t-test statistic. But notice, guys, we don't have a sample mean, so we're going to have to enter this data into our calculator. So I'm going to go to Stat and Edit and go ahead and enter these heights into list 1. So our first height is 64, 66, 68, 60, 62, 65, 66, and 63. All right. I'm going to go straight to Stat Tests. We are doing a t-test for this one because we don't know the population standard deviation. And if we're going to calculate a standard deviation, it's going to be of those 8 people. So it's going to be a sample standard deviation. But instead of highlighting stats here, I'm going to highlight data because we've entered the data into a list in our calculator. It's still going to ask me for that null hypothesis. The mean height was 63. We did enter the numbers, the data, into list 1. And then the alternative hypothesis is greater than 63. So let's go ahead and calculate. The calculator is going to go ahead and tell me what the mean of the sample was. Notice X bar is 64.25. The population mean that was given in the prompt is 63. The sample standard deviation, the calculator tells me that that's 2.55 if I round that to 2 decimal places. And then divided by the square root of the sample size, which was 8. The calculator told me that that t is 1.3, again, 9 if I round that to 2 decimal places. So taking a look at where that falls on the distribution, 1.39 is going to be in between 0 and my critical value of 1.895. So we're in this region. We are in the non-shaded region. Okay, step number 4, the p-value. The calculator told me that that p-value was 0.104. Okay, notice that that p-value, that probability is higher than the 5%. Also, we're in the non-shaded region, so my decision is do not reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. If we're not rejecting, that means we're keeping the null and we're not supporting the alternative. So my summary statement would say something like, at alpha equal to 0.05, there is not sufficient evidence to say that the heights are increasing. Okay, this next example, you guys, is the U-try. So take a look at this example, pause the video, and then unpause the video to see the answer to this prompt. Okay, here's this problem worked out. So our null and alternative hypothesis, mu is equal to 150 versus the alternative does not equal 150. We were testing different. So that's the not equal to case. We're going to shade both sides for a not equal to scenario. The alpha value, again, for this prompt was not given. So I used 0.05, but since we're splitting between two tails, that would put 0.025 on either side. The n was 40 for this prompt, so degree of freedom would technically be 39. 39 was not on my degree of freedom list, so I went ahead and used degree of freedom 40 because it was the closest one to 39. That gave me a positive or negative 2.021 for the critical value. The t-test statistic came out to negative 2.72. I put a blue line on my curve indicating where that is. Notice that it's in the shaded region. Our probability is pretty small, 0.0096. That's smaller than the 5% alpha value. So we reject the null hypothesis. If we're rejecting the null, that means that we're getting rid of the idea that the mean is equal to 150, and we're supporting that it's different than that. So my summary statement would say at alpha equal to 0.05, there does seem to be evidence to support that the average grocery bill is not $150, or it's different from $150. Okay, guys, this concludes notes for today.